welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Making Monsters. I'm Taylor Dahl, and it's been a couple weeks since I kind of did the recap of the draft picks, getting to know them a little bit. Now it's the dead period, so we're in that in-between of what's happened at OTAs, looking ahead at training camp in, I guess, about a month, a little less than a month for the Bears with the rookies reporting. But we're joined today by Brett Kollmann. You're probably familiar with him. Brett works close with one of our dear friends, EJ Snyder. But, Brett, you're the creator of the All 32, which we love that. We love the Bootleg Podcast, Bootleg Football Podcast that you guys do too. So appreciate your time. And I'm excited to kind of break down the Detroit offense a little bit and how that may translate over here to Chicago.
I think it's a perfect fit, honestly. And it's so funny, like Bears fans listening to this. All last season, everybody knew like the Shane Waldron thing just wasn't working. And everybody could tell very quickly that it just wasn't working. We had high hopes and it didn't go well. Yeah. And the Eberflus stuff wasn't working. And I feel like in the back of everybody's mind, Ben Johnson was sitting there like the entire season of like, he would be a perfect fit. He'd be great for Caleb. He's got the energy. You know, there's like that Sean McVay kind of young hotshot vibe. And I think Bears fans the entire year were thinking, if we could just get Ben Johnson, we could really see what we have here. But at the same time, I think most Bears fans didn't think that they were going to get him because of the franchise's history and how they typically spend on coaches. And, you know, it was a dream that didn't seem possible. And then all of a sudden, it happened. And it almost feels like we've been in a fever dream ever since then. Really? And it's just been constant good news, and I'm not used to it. So, as Bears fans, not sure what to trust, but it feels good.
Yeah, we've all had our feelings hurt so many times that, to your point, last year, because there was the rumors the year before that Ben Johnson said he would – how much of that is true? I don't know. Rumors were that if they did part with Eberflus the year before, Ben Johnson was willing. He turned down some other jobs, but reportedly was willing to come to Chicago because he did want to work with. At that time, it was Justin Fields, so obviously that switched to even since that sense. But I don't know. I don't know how much of that was true. I don't know how much of that was Bears fans just trying to make themselves feel better during the season. But the Waldron thing felt sour, to your point, from very early on. Once it was kind of like, okay, cool. I guess he's part of the McVay world, so maybe this will be something. But then you start immediately hearing stuff from Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was very obvious of like that. And people were like, oh, no, well, it's just he's mad because he didn't get the targets there in Seattle. And so it was just kind of this weird from the get-go of things that were going on. And we didn't know. I had some reports because Caleb comes down here and trains during the off season, and some things kind of were said that I heard at that point that back in training camp, there were already issues and players were going to Ryan Poles at that point saying, this isn't going to work. And that's, to me, that's a big, if your players can't even get through camp without saying something's wrong, then something's very wrong. But Brett, let's talk about it a little bit. That Detroit offense, obviously one of the more high-powered, efficient offenses we've seen in a long time, and they do so many different creative things. So let's start with that. The base of what makes that Detroit offense, or what has made that Detroit offense tick the last few years with Ben Johnson.
It's one of the oldest concepts in the sport, which is going under center. And there's a lot of offenses that don't really prioritize going under center these days. Ben Johnson believes in putting his quarterback under center. And there's a lot of different advantages that come with that, right? Even if you just think of the run game, when the quarterback's in the shotgun and the running back is off to his side, generally speaking, there's really only one direction that run is going to go, because the action of the handoff is going across the quarterback's face. So you can expect a lot of zone runs to go from left to right or right to left, depending on where the running back is lined up. Sometimes you can see some vertical stuff hit same side, but it's more of a side dish than an entree. And it makes run games, particularly shotgun run games, very predictable. One of the only teams that I think does the shotgun run game well in a creative way is Arizona, but it's few and far between. Meanwhile, if you go under center, you can call any run concept you want from under center, and it can hit anywhere from under center. And it's a lot harder for linebackers to read it pre-snap, to diagnose it post-snap, because there's a whole bunch of different actions you can do off that. And so it just makes your run game less predictable and therefore potentially more explosive, especially if you have the backfield that Detroit did. And then at the same time, under center play action is just like a cheat code for opening up the middle of the field. And that was something that we saw Jared Goff do really well. It's something we've seen Stafford do really well. Even Sam Darnold, like all the quarterbacks that are in heavy under center and heavy play action offenses work the middle of the field really well. Caleb worked the middle of the field really well last year, even without being in an offense that really prioritized it to that level. And like, we know that he works really hard, and he's been working all summer down in Florida to get his footwork right. And I think that they are going to hit the ground running a lot earlier than people think, because Caleb is committed to the vision of lining up under center on like half his snaps. He's committed to the vision of doing a bunch of hard play action fakes and turning his back to the defense to suck these linebackers up and open up the middle of the field. He's committed to how the run game is going to work. It feels like he's in lockstep with Ben Johnson. And so when I look at what works for Detroit, there's really no reason for me to think that it's not going to work in Chicago, because they have all the personnel to do what Detroit did. They have the quarterback to do it. They obviously have the same play caller. It's not presumptuous of me or just copium to think this is going to be a top 12 to 14 offense in the NFL, which I think Bears fans would be thrilled with at this point.
Yeah, definitely. After the past several seasons, yes. So let me ask you then, when it comes to the offensive line, because that's one of the biggest conversations when it comes to Ben Johnson's offenses and how Detroit worked. When you have that quarterback that's under center, how much is the offensive line in play in that? Does it affect what type of offensive lineman you need when you are under center that amount of time?
It absolutely does. You really need size and stoutness on the interior, because you can kind of get away with having a soft middle of the pocket when you're in shotgun, because if you're just doing like a quick little like 1-step drop or even like 3-step quick game out of the shotgun, interior pressure doesn't affect you that much because you're already so far away from it when you get the ball in your hands, right? And so you can just catch it in shotgun, take 3 quick steps, get the ball out, and like, unless Aaron Donald is on top of you, it's hard for a 3 technique to get there that quickly. But if you're under center and you're going to drop back pass from under center, like you got to get out of there, because any sort of interior pressure is going to be right on top of you from the moment you get the ball. So having a strong interior that can short set and keep the frontal cone of the pocket as rigid as possible while the quarterback is getting depth, that is what's important. And that's also why they went and got Joe Thuney, because you kind of can't do it without a guard like that.
Yeah. And that's what I was about to ask. Obviously, those 3 interior positions are all different, with Joe Thuney, Drew Dahlman, and then Jonah Jackson too, who Jonah Jackson has familiarity in that Ben Johnson offense, being in Detroit before. And so I do think that you could tell early on Ben Johnson was trying to replicate as much as possible what he had in Detroit. It's obviously not all the same. Not everything is identical, but to your point, I do think they did as much as they could in one offense to try and get that as close as possible. I heard a quote when I was kind of getting to know Ben Johnson during the offseason. I talked to a lot of Detroit fans that covered him during that time and kind of got their idea of what they've seen over time and any of the quotes that kind of stood out of how an offense was built. And one of the things one of the guys said to me was that Ben Johnson made a comment that he said he likes to show 14 different things to defenses, but prepare for 4. And that always stuck out to me, because like, to me, obviously you're trying to confuse the defense at that point, but it's not trying to complicate it for the quarterback. And I think that's so beneficial for Caleb Williams, because I do feel like at times last year, there were moments where you felt like, okay, he was trying to do pre-snap stuff already, or 4 weeks into the season, and Shane Waldron was just kind of like, here, go. So I do think that in a way, Ben Johnson's trying to be more creative with this offense, but not technically put more on Caleb.
Yeah, it's about having the pillars that the offense is built on, and then all the little bells and whistles can just be little offshoots of those pillars. You get the pillars down first, and then even if you just do a tiny little variation on one of the core principles or core concepts of this offense, a tiny variation can look wildly different to a defense. Even if we're running the same play out of roughly the same formation, if we do a little extra motion to get into that formation, show something, have the Z go across, then we get into what we were in before, but we do it with pace and we do it quickly, so the defense doesn't realize that's what we're in until like the ball is already being snapped. Or maybe we can call the same kind of concept, but from a different protection, or, all these tiny little tweaks and variations. Like, you can get away with running not going to say not that many plays, but you can get away with running less concepts than you think in the NFL, as long as you just execute them in a bunch of different little ways that just keeps the defense guessing.
Yeah, and that's what I think, that when you look back at Detroit's offense in general, they had the highest first down rate. They were the third best when it came to the red zone. So all of the boxes that you want to check on efficient offenses, they were able to do that. Now the big question is, how does that transfer? And we've mentioned a few of the things that may and may not. I think the big one is the running back room. So I want to get your thoughts on that, because obviously David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs and what they were able to do over there. And then now a lot of Bears fans are down and out on DeAndre Swift just because of how last year went. And then you kind of have that competition behind him. Is it going to be Roschon Johnson? Does he have a breakout year, or is it going to be they drafted Kyle Monangai later in the draft? And a lot of people think he may be a part of this, but do the Bears have the running backs to even make kind of some of these plays work in the Ben Johnson system?
I think what they're hoping for is that DeAndre Swift is like 70% of Jahmyr Gibbs and Roschon Johnson is like 80% of David Montgomery, and just fill the roles, right? Mm-hmm. They're hoping they can get the explosiveness and the edge run game from DeAndre Swift. And then anytime you get in the red zone, it's Roschon Johnson territory. Like, I think that's the plan. Mm-hmm. Whether or not they can get 70 to 80% of the Lions run game out of this group, I guess we'll see. But I think they would take 70 to 80% of that at this point, because they just need 70 to 80% of what that run game was last year to make Caleb's life less difficult. Yeah. If they can just get a threat of a run game, Caleb can do the rest. In theory, on paper, presumptively. But the receivers are good enough. The pass protection should be good enough. Like, you just need to have like the 16th, 17th ranked run game. Mm-hmm. The rest will take care of itself.
Yeah, and I always go back to 2022 and Jamal Williams, who had that 17 touchdown season with Ben Johnson in Detroit. And then since then, it's been like 1 touchdown here, 2 touchdowns here. So Ben Johnson's clearly capable of bringing more out of players when they kind of have to be that guy. So I'm interested to see what exactly it looks like. I think a lot of it was wrong schematically with last year, and I want to get your thoughts on that. I know you guys have your NFC North, your bootleg football, and you break everything down. You're not there yet. That's coming up. But when you talk about what they did wrong with DeAndre Swift last year, he always feels like he's more of that outside perimeter type of guy. He'll break free over there. He's not the break tackle up the middle, force tackles type of thing. And if they kept trying to force that and it wasn't working. Did you notice that too watching last year?
It just felt like a bunch of square pegs in round holes schematically. And it was Waldron saying, we're going to run what we're going to run. And like, that's our system. That's what we're committing to. And it's like, okay, well, why don't you run what your players are good at? Yeah. And that just, for whatever reason, that wasn't his philosophy. And I think when I look at the Bears staff this year, it's really more about identifying what our players are good at, mm-hmm. and just relying on that. Like, if we're going to punch, we're going to throw our best punch. Because you also have to think about it from a macro perspective in the NFL. Most teams are only going to get about 65 plays a game. In college, you're going to get up to 80. Like, Syracuse ran 80 plays a game. So college is really more about explosiveness through volume, and you just operate at tempo and you run a whole bunch of plays, and eventually the defense just cracks because you can't be perfect for 80 plays. In the NFL, okay, we're going to run 60 to 65 plays. We better make sure that they're our best 60 to 65 plays. They better be efficient. They better be maximizing the skill sets that we have on the field. Like, everything is just, it's so much more tuned at the NFL level. And it just felt like Waldron was calling it like he was a college OC, of like, we are just going to brute force this thing. We're going to run what we run and just hope that eventually the defense makes a mistake. And that's not how NFL defenses work. Like, if you can only call inside zone sift so many times where the linebacker's like, that's where the ball's going, I'm just going to go there. It was wildly irresponsible to call an offense that way. And yet he did it.
Yeah, I remember like 5-6 weeks in, the announcers were like, yeah, we were talking to the coach or talking to someone in the building. I don't remember who it was, but they didn't even have a scripted first drive. Like, that's how unprepared Shane Waldron and staff were. And you have a rookie quarterback who, and by the way, a rookie wide receiver in Roman Dunze that you're trying to figure things out. Keenan Allen, who, yes, is a veteran, but was new to the offense. So there was a lot of pieces trying to figure each other out. And you don't even have a plan to start the game for all of these guys trying to figure each other out. It was one thing after another last year. I was like, this is I feel like I'm being punked at this point. Like there's no way that a team's actually doing this. But let's talk about Caleb Williams, because I think that is obviously one of the biggest talking points is what does Caleb look like this year? What needs to improve the most? And we talk about his deep passes. They struggled a lot last year, which is interesting because it felt like at USC coming out of college into the draft, that was the thing that was like most comfortable. Okay, we know Caleb Williams can sling it down the field. That's not a problem. Can he do all of these other things? Can he get out of the crazy plays and not have to leave the pocket right away? Can he get the middle of the field? Can he do those intermediate things? Those things kind of felt like they were working, but for some reason the deep pass wasn't. Why would that be? Is that part of just the offensive scheme too, or is that Caleb trying to do too much? What do you think was going on there?
It's kind of all of the above, right? If you're playing in an offense without structure, an offense without purpose, an offense without any sort of critical thought put into it, you're basically just by default telling the quarterback, go do everything. And not to mention when it's a bunch of receivers that you've never played with before, and you're trying to develop timing and you're trying to understand, okay, what is the optimal window for me to put this ball for this particular receiver at this depth? It takes time to learn your guys, and it takes even more time to learn your guys when you're basically just winging it every single week and you don't really have a structure. Like I'm not even convinced that they had the practice time, like quality practice time to work on all this kind of stuff. Not to mention it, like Caleb didn't have a full offseason to get everybody together and do a whole bunch of throwing set. Like now he does, obviously. But like you're going through your rookie offseason, you don't even get drafted till late April. Then you got rookie minicamp and OTA. Like you don't have time to put together workouts and throwing sessions with anybody except Rome, who he had thrown with before the draft, but he didn't throw with anybody else. So how can we expect him to have chemistry and timing in an offense that makes no sense with a bunch of receivers that he's never really played with before? It just felt like he was set up to fail. And, deep passes are already low percentage as it is. They're going to be even lower, if all those things are factored in. So it should be better this year. He's got more time to get with his receivers this offseason and develop that timing and chemistry. We'll see how quickly he can develop it with Luther Burden, who's going through the same thing this year, rookie offseason, very condensed. But I would have to imagine at minimum his chemistry with DJ and Rome is going to be way better.
What are you envisioning with that? You have DJ Moore now, Rome Odunze. You added Zacchaeus, I always forget how to say his name, from Washington. And then obviously you draft Colston Loveland, you draft Luther Burden, you already have Cole Kmet. And that's what I think Bears fans kind of take a step back a little bit, because last year we were saying the same thing, like, oh, you have DJ Moore and Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen and Cole Kmet and all of these pieces, and it felt like it never clicked. To your point, now he has this full offseason to work with most of these guys outside of Burden. But what do you envision this offense, that the rotation of what these wide receivers could look like? Where do you see them fitting best? We know Rome's kind of that. The contested catches, 50 balls. Rome's really good at that. DJ can do a little bit of everything. But your opinion, how does that all mesh together?
I think this team is going to be really 12 personnel heavy, because that also allows them to have a more diverse run game. So you're going to have Cole Kmet as your Y, probably Colston Loveland as your move tight end at first, also double as a big slot. You could put him outside even. And I would say they're going to be sticking in that personnel grouping with both DJ and Rome on the field most of the time. But the fact that you have Zacchaeus and you have Tyler Scott, you have Luther Burden, that all have different skill sets, means that you can give DJ and Rome rest throughout the game. And, so that every single time they come on the field, they are rested. They're running routes at full speed, 100 miles an hour. Not that they wouldn't otherwise, but it's a lot easier to run go routes over and over and over again if you're getting like a little bit of a blow here and there. So I think Zacchaeus is going to be like your classic, kind of not sacrificial X, but like you're going to put him out on the field there as an X receiver when Rome is off the field, allow DJ to move around a little bit more. Or if DJ is off the field, you can bring in Tyler Scott to be like more of like a true deep threat Z, or like a speed slot. Luther Burden, I see him more as like a yak guy, a gadget play kind of guy. I don't necessarily think that he's going to be a do-it-all receiver, but in a role as wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, that's really good after the catch and can do all of the screen game stuff that DJ does, but without having to rely on DJ to do all the screen game stuff. He's another guy that can roll in there as part of the rotation. And then Dev Duve as well, the jet sweep guy, another screen threat. So it's a diverse pool of skill sets in that receiving core. But the fact that most of the time they're probably getting 12 personnel means that they can consistently rotate them in to get access to those different skill sets while also resting everybody else so that nobody's like dog tired in the fourth quarter, down by 4 points. We got to go. We got to stretch the field, and you're lagging because you're so tired. Like, all these guys are going to be able to be 100% at the end of the game.
Were you surprised they went Colston Loveland over Tyler Warren?
A little bit, but considering what we saw Sam Laporta do for Ben Johnson in Detroit, I feel like the way that Ben Johnson used Laporta as far as being the man breaker, as far as being somebody who can stretch the field and not get most of his explosives after the catch, Tyler Warren's really more of like an explosive after the catch receiver than he is an explosive down the field receiver. You can do a whole bunch of really fun stuff, with Warren on like the goal line or in short yardage as like a wildcat quarterback. He's a really tough blocker. Like, there's a lot to love about Tyler Warren. But as far as using the tight end as a seam ripper, as a vertical threat, I feel like Colston kind of fits that role a little bit better. Not to mention that, how many linebackers exist that can run with him down the field? So it kind of scares defensive coaches a little bit more. Again, I thought Warren was going to go first, but I also had heard that there was multiple teams that had Loveland as like a top 5 talent in this class. So I wasn't that shocked that he went to Chicago.
Yeah, and I think that there was a little bit of panic initially, and then when everybody was like, the fit's there, and then Rappaport came out with like, there was all these phone calls being made, and then as soon as the Bears took Loveland, the phone call stopped. So there was assumptions that Loveland was maybe more taught it after than other people thought. So that's just an interesting thing. It'll be fascinating.
There was at least 2 teams that I know that had Loveland as the highest rated Michigan player.
Wow.
Over the defensive tackles.
Yeah.
So again, everybody sees these guys differently, but he had a lot of fans in the league.
I love that. I was thinking of a stat when we were talking about the dysfunction of last year, and you talked about, the fitting square pegs into round holes thing. I remember one of the stats I read from last year that in Keenan Allen's career, his average yards per target was like 8.4 or something. And with Shane Waldron, it was like 12.6. And I was like, that right there, what are we doing? I don't understand why you are turning these people that are really good at what they do and forcing them to do something else. It'll never make sense to me. So obviously that's something we hope change. I wanted to ask you a couple more before I let you go. And I wanted to flip to the other side of the ball because I know it's a lot of offense, and that's going to be the big thing because of Ben Johnson. But defensively, they bring in Dennis Allen too. And Dennis Allen is, as a head coach, it didn't probably pan out the way that the Saints wanted it to. But defensive, when it comes to being a defensive coordinator, he's put some really good defenses out there, and the Bears now invested in that and adding Grady Jarrett and Dio Adingbo and then drafting Shamar Turner in this, and that's in addition to already having Montez Sweat and Javon Dexter finding their way, and honestly a secondary that's pretty good. We'll figure out what happens to that outside corner across from Jalen Johnson if Tyreek. There was obviously some issues last year with that, but what are your thoughts on how quickly this could kind of work? Are you a fan of Dennis Allen and that hiring at all?
As a DC, I think Dennis Allen is really, really good at his job. Head coach, again, hasn't worked out in the multiple times he was given an opportunity, but he has consistently been a very, very good defensive coordinator. In particular, very good at getting his defensive lines to play as good as humanly possible with the talent that he has. They missed a lot on defensive line picks. Well, not missed a lot, but I would say they sunk a lot of resources into the defensive line when he was there in New Orleans over the years, and the hit rate was less than you'll want. They once had Trey Hendrickson and let him walk for whatever reason, and they tried to replace him with a couple high round investments at edge, and it just felt like it was the Cam Jordan show for a while. They rotated in all these guys in off the street at defensive tackle, and individually, you're like, God, it's just Cam and a bunch of guys. And then you look up at the end of the year and it's like, oh, the top 5 run defense and, one of the most effective pass rushes. And Dennis Allen was very good at creating a good defensive line that was more than the sum of its parts, even when the front office was consistently swinging and missing on investment. He got the most out of his guys. So I look at, the investment that Chicago's made in the defensive line over the last couple of years. You got Montez, you got Dex. And I love that pick at the time. You brought in Grady, you brought in Dio. That's a better front four, like talent-wise, than I think Dennis Allen had to work with in New Orleans for the last several years, like literally several years. He has not had that kind of talent, and he was producing good defensive lines. So I would say, from the jump, the Bears defense is going to run from that defensive line. And then you look at the linebacking core, solid linebacking core, the secondary. To your point, not sure who the other outside corner is going to be, but like bunch of killers in the secondary.
Yeah.
This should be a really, really, really good defense. In fact, I'd be very surprised if they're not.
Yeah, and that's why they added Al Harris too, coming from Dallas, who has just been who's constantly developed some of these young guys over there in their secondary. And it's funny because everybody I talk to when they talk about a Dennis Allen defense, they all talk about the importance of the defensive line, especially the interior defensive line, and that's something that's been an issue in Chicago. I love the Javon Dexter pick too. I've loved it since it happened. Andrew Billings is really good. He's one of the better run stuffers in the league, but he got hurt last year, so we'll see how healthy he is. But I really did like the Shamar Turner pick too. I was very glad they did Shamar Turner and not the other Shamar out of Texas. But I think that it's funny because they say that, like, oh, how important his defensive line is and that interior, but he's technically a secondary guy. Like that's his specialty. But because that pass rush, he feels like helps the rotation of having many guys that can get sacks and get to the quarterback and create pressures. That helps his secondary so much. He like drools over having guys like that can create kind of wreak havoc up front.
And the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you look at the units that he's coached over the years, and they followed that blueprint, and they were really, really good at it. Again, I think he's one of the defensive coaches that makes defenses that are better than the sum of their parts, and I can't say that about a lot of other DCs in the league. And plus he has head coach experience. So I think he's going to be, a good guide for Ben Johnson as well, as far as navigating some of the pitfalls of being a first-time head coach. When you look at this entire team, I'm just blown away by how different it looks and how different the feeling is from this time last year. Like we were crossing our fingers and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
But it feels real this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, am I crazy for thinking that?
And I don't think like we're scared. Obviously, we have a lot of PTSD of like there's been years, but it does feel different this year. And I also think it feels like it's been a product. And I was having this conversation earlier. I've been a big Ryan Poles supporter, even when other people have kind of trashed him in situations. And to me, he took over a roster. When he took over, it clearly was bad. Like the roster itself was in really bad shape. It was, I want to say it was like almost 60% of the roster was hitting free agency when he took over. It was not good anyways. They weren't winning football games. And then he had no first round pick. He only had 5 picks total in the draft that year. The Bears had like $88 million in dead cap. And he's turned all that into what looks like now on paper. They have to go win games to prove that. But on paper, a 10 times better roster than what he took over. He took the dead cap from like 80 plus million to 4 million. He's just done so much when it comes to just building this for the future too. And I think that's what a lot of people want to like win now and get a little impatient of, okay, well, this should have happened because, you got Caleb Williams and you had this and blah, blah, blah. But I think that he was so focused on building something that's established and going to be more than just a 1-2 year kind of lucky fix like we had in 2018. And so it does feel different because it does feel like a lot of these pieces are locked in. You talk about Caleb's young, Rome's young, now Luther Burden's young, Colston and Cole just got a contract. Colston's young. The offensive line, he made sure to get Tooney and then give him a contract because he didn't want to let him go. So I think he's very strategic in the things that he's done. And it's kind of refreshing because Ryan Pace was kind of like, here's all the money in the world. Let's win this year. And it would be fun for 1 year and then it would fall apart because there's no plan for the after of that.
Also, shout out Dave Tepper for making this possible.
Yes, thank you.
Salute you. Build him a statue outside the stadium, why don't you?
And then Lovie Smith, we were like, thank you so much. All right, Brett. Well, I really appreciate it. I enjoy the chat and let everyone know, because you did say the NFC North, your bootleg football podcast with NFC North is coming up.
Yeah, we do 32 episodes spread across 8 weeks. So we do all 8 divisions in order. spending probably about an hour on average per team, previewing every single team, what went wrong, what went right last year, what are the changes they made in the offseason, what do we expect their new identity to be. And we started out with the West Division, so by the time this goes out, I'm assuming next week, it'll be our first division that gets published, which is the AFC West, then NFC West, and then we're heading north with the AFC and NFC North. So the Bears episode should be out in a few weeks. But we're going to be saying a lot of the same stuff we said today, which is we think probably they're pretty good.
We hope so. Fingers crossed. Again, I thank you and enjoy the rest of the week. I know you guys are crazy right now, so I appreciate your time.
Of course.
Thanks.